Hello, hello. How is everyone? Are you reading a lot? I know I am. And have you been watching the Winter Olympics? Brattleboro has its very own version next weekend with the 100th anniversary of the Harris Hill ski jump. But tonight we're time traveling out west with award-winning author Jonathan Evison to discover how a train accident reveals the connections among a host of people across the race, class, history, and in the country in a historical epic. Through the 170 years of this country's history, probing its injustices along the way, the book is plainly a response to the era that's created dividing lines among the country. It was thoroughly enjoyable, truly the great American novel. I could not put it down. So, with the February thaw, I'm enjoying a nice rosé this evening. And from his incredibly clever website, I can pretty well bet what Jonathan will be enjoying. What is everyone else drinking? Fabulous. Jonathan Evison is the award-winning author of the novels All About Lulu, West of Here, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, which was made into a film, The Fundamentals of Caring, which is on Netflix, This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, and Legends of the North Cascades. His new book, Small World, has received starred reviews in Kirkus, Book List, and Book Page, and is recommended by the New York Times. Evison is also the author of Lawn Boy, the winner of an Alex Award in 2019, which is at the very center of the recent school book bans. He lives with his wife and 3 adorable children on an island in Washington State, so you will want to buy his book. This book right here, you want to buy it. Supporting a family of 5 is expensive. The link to purchase the book is in the chat, so you can just jump on there and do it right now. Post your questions in the Q&A, and I will be back with Johnny in a little bit. And please welcome Jonathan Evison.
I'm on?
You are.
Well, thank you for joining me, people. I come to you from my neighbor Bob's house, because I actually live up in the mountains, in the Olympic Mountains, as well as Bainbridge Island. And I'm out at my mountain place right now, and I don't have any internet up here, not enough to support streaming. So my neighbor Bob, I walk down the hill, God love him. He's up doing some plumbing for me right now too. That's how good my neighbor is. He lets me come down here to his living room, set up a green screen so I can have my virtual backgrounds, and so that I can join you today. Thanks for coming. I'm gonna talk about my newest novel, Small World. That said, I'm ready to talk about anything. I mean, we could talk about the book banning, we could talk about craft, the writer's life in general, anything you want to talk about. I'm going to strongly encourage you to just go ahead and put immediately, whenever they cross your mind, put your questions in the Q&A, because I like this to be more of a conversation, instead of me just yapping at you the whole time. So put those in the Q&A rather than the chat. And again, no holds barred. I'm forthcoming. I tend to overshare. So I'll just start rambling a bit about Small World. And I'll kind of tell you the story of its conception, and we'll just see where we go from there. It was on the eve of my 50th birthday. Something about turning 50 really kind of lit a fire under my ass. I was getting ready to start what would be my 7th published novel. And I don't know, I just really, really wanted to swing for the fences on this one. I wanted to risk it all. I'd worked 15 years in and 6 previous novels to build up a sustainable career and, you know, support a family of 5. And I wanted to risk all of that. I wanted to write a book so ambitious that if I failed, I was just going to fall flat on my face, you know, because I really wanted to play in a high stakes game. You know, I really feel like as an artist, that's when I'm at my best, when I'm forced to sort of develop new tools and as I go. And in the case of this novel, my goal was to write a novel that could just barely sustain the force of its own invention. And yet I wanted to make it a page turner at the same time. I wanted to write, I literally said to myself, I had all this whiteboard spread out all over the ping pong table and the pool table, and I had like 20 colors of pens, you know, and I just start this process of sort of stream of consciousness note taking on where I want to go with this. And each pen color sort of correlates to a different line of thinking or a different character, or, you know, one page over here might be about theme, one page over here might be set pieces, one page over here might be characters. And I literally said to myself, fuck it, man, I'm going to write the great American novel or die trying. And so then what I had to do was kind of define what that is, because, you know, the term, the great American novel, is such a broad term and encompasses so many, you know, a wildly diverse group of titles, anything from, you know, The Catcher in the Rye to The Grapes of Wrath, to The Invisible Man, to The Adventures of Augie March. I've even heard Lolita bandied about as a great American novel, even though, you know, Nabokov was not an American. So I had to decide, I had to define what that meant for me. And I thought about all these books that have sort of fallen under that umbrella of the great American novel. And the ones that were kind of the closest to my conception of the novel, which is, I wanted to write a novel that spoke both to the present moment, and, you know, the present moment in America, and also encompass as much of its history as I could possibly cogently, you know, employ in one giant puzzle of a narrative. And the books that I think came closest for me would be, I mean, the book that probably came closest to what I was conceiving of what I would call the great American novel was not one novel, it was 3 novels, which was John Dos Passos' USA trilogy, which sort of like Small World was a story. It was only over a couple decades though, as I recall. It was a story that employed many points of view, a story told from, I don't know how many points of view, 10, 12 points of view. In my book, I think there's 20 points of view. Half of the novel takes place in 1850, kind of the beginning of this, you know, pre-industrial revolution, pre-Civil War, nation building, manifest destiny area in our history. And then the other part of the novel takes place in 2019 on a doomed passenger train heading up the West Coast. So I gave myself a lot to work with. I wanted to cover as much breadth as I could of the American experience. And instead of writing a sort of broad, third-person, omnipotent narrative, I decided if it was going to be truly American, and by American, I mean the ideal of America, I mean the true American ethos, then it had to be diverse. The novel itself had to be egalitarian. It had to represent as many voices, as many cultures as I possibly could. And so I set out to do it, and it was, you know, I ended up having, it was about 700 or 800 pages at one point, but then I ended up whittling about 4 or 5 characters out of the scope of it, because it's not that it couldn't sustain them. It's just I was having trouble with these particular characters serving the greater narrative. My idea for the book was it was to write a book that worked like a puzzle, that where the reader had to put these pieces of these smaller, limited points of view to form a grander picture of America over 170 years. And as far as I could tell, it worked. Readers are loving it. The reviews have been amazing, and I'm super thrilled that, like, people are reading the book and really, you know, sort of getting what I was trying to do. And so that's the most rewarding thing a writer could ever possibly ask for. We're already stacking up some questions. What's up with the hat, says Judy Fink. Okay, well, let me tell you something. pandemic land. Okay, that's what's up with the hat. For 12 years, I had this sort of my brand, my look, my professional look, which was this nice blue fedora that my grandfather gave me, and a nice blue suit. I had a million blue suits, but that was kind of my uniform. And I did 11 national tours, slogging around to like 400 different independent bookstores. And I always had all my publicity photos, everything. I had this look. And then the pandemic happened. And then I, like everybody else, I just put on a bunch of weight. Time came to tour for this book. And it's like none of my suits would fit, man. I mean, I would be popping buttons on the vest if anybody made me laugh, and I'd like, screw it, man. I gotta come up with something else. And my 4-year-old daughter came up with the $2 novelty hat. I think it's distinctive. It's a look, and so that's it. I believe in having a look, and so that's up. It's a $2 novelty hat, and I'm wearing sweatpants. You can't see that. That's about what I wear these days. Okay, so Melissa Miller wants to know, when you do a novel rewrite, what is your process and what are the goals? Number of words a day, for example. Okay, this is, I don't really put a word limit on things. I just want to make progress every day. And however, when I'm in the groove, when you say the process of rewriting, that is the whole process for me. Like the rewriting is just there from the first chapter. I'm constantly rewriting. I don't just go through a draft in a linear manner and then go back and, all right, let's take another run at it. I'm constantly, despite all my note taking and outlining and everything else, I'm constantly reinventing the thing itself as I get inside it and I get familiarized with it and I see opportunities. And the minute I see new opportunities to achieve my ends or work with the reader in some way that's going to make the book better, I have to go back and reverse engineer that idea into the whole thing. So like the whole process of composition is rewriting constantly. With this book, I would say, though I didn't really have a set goal, I was producing pretty steadily on this book because I was really prepared by the time I got into it. And there was one point I got snowed in for 10 days up at the cabin. My family couldn't get to me. Thank God I had plenty of beer and food because I was expecting the whole family. So, I had shopped for 7 people and I had all this alcohol and food. So I was fine, but I got stuck up here for 10 days. And I think I wrote about a quarter of the novel in that 10 days because I just piled up. I think I wrote 140, 150 pages. I piled up so many pages because how it works for me is like every day I sink into the thing without any distractions, the easier it is to just get out of my own way and let the story sort of tell itself and work its way through me. And so after, by about day 5, I was, I was piling up 10, 15 pages a day. And just by the end of it, man, I had such a good start on this novel that it, I'd say my work days, I usually, my usual work schedule is like 16 hours a day, 2 days a week. So because I have 3 young kids and I have a bunch of other responsibilities and I volunteer in their classrooms, and plus there's all the professional stuff. And so I really have to jam it into these 2 16-hour a day periods. And that actually works really well because once I get fully immersed in the story, I'm completely out of my own way. And it really, I can be much more productive that way than if I was just trying to beat everybody up in the morning and get 2 hours done. Because sometimes it just takes 2 hours to really just get out of my own way. I mean, so much I think of good writing is just really trusting the process and just not making it about you, making it about the reader, making it about the story, and giving yourself to the thing itself, as I like to call it. Was I able to fit Bainbridge Island into any of my books from Frank Fahey? Yes, a number of them, particularly Lawn Boy, because Mike, though he lives on the Indian reservation in Suquamish, just across the bridge from Bainbridge, he works almost all the clients for the landscaping crew he works for are on Bainbridge Island because it's a novel about wealth disparity, and Bainbridge is on the wealthy side of it. I think it's been mentioned a few times. One thing I do with Bainbridge Island is I always just like take names out of my high school yearbooks and stuff because, there's just some great names. And plus I know it's fun for these people. I'm really blessed in the sense that a lot of my core readers, I have so many core readers that are people I actually like played Little League with, or like every time I do an event at my hometown store, my high school detention teacher shows up and the vice principal and like all these people from 40 years of history on that island. And so I like to drop little Easter eggs in there for them like names of teachers or names of students I went to school with and stuff like that. Just a little nod of the head. So Bainbridge Island is definitely a part of the conception at all times. Thanks for all the questions. This is great. Tom Bedell. Yes, let's talk about the book banning in light of the recent seemingly increasing efforts to suppress books that have any kind of seemingly offensive content. Yeah, if you may or may not know, I've been embroiled in this stuff for 5 months. I was like the first book that really got called out by that woman in Leander, Texas, the mama bear, as they like to call her, who did not read the book, who took one passage of the book and read it out of context. But even from the out of context passage, she read a clear reading. It is quite salient that there's no pedophilia in the book. But this lady took that, posted a TikTok video of herself, like, basically just hijacking a school board meeting. You could just see the eyes rolling. And what I will say about all of it, and so I've spent 5 months, first I got a bunch of death threats and things like that, people calling me a pedophile, and that stuff started to calm down eventually. And then it became more about an outpouring of support from educators, from school librarians, and from students, a lot of students asking me, saying, look, I'm going to go to my school board meeting. Could you write a statement for me? And so, it's been, I've written a lot of statements, and each one's sort of individual to the situation in the community. So it's been kind of a huge distraction in a way, but I mean, it's a good fight. But at the end of the day, I think that what this really is not even about people trying to, look, these people have got to know that their kids have TikTok. I mean, they have the internet at their fingertips. They can find gangbang porn, in 5 seconds if they want, so I don't think it's really the issue of protecting their kids. I think this is a conservative ploy to, it's a dog whistle. And the way they're sort of framing the argument is that, hey, parents, these school districts, these woke school districts are trying to keep your voice out of the classroom. They don't think you should be able to tell what the kids are. And like all dog whistles for the, conservative crowd, they're just sort of glomming onto it. Nobody has read the book. I get these just horrible, angry messages from people saying just awful things about my daughters and things like that. And at the end of the day, I know they haven't even picked up the book. They've never held it in their hands, let alone read it. They're just reacting to a dog whistle. So yeah, it's been quite an odyssey. All it does is sell books. So, thank you, conservative book banners, because all you did was sell an entire print run of Lawn Boy. And now, it's back to press for another print run. So thanks for that, Tom. I wonder if Tom's any relation to my friend Gary Bedell. I'm sure there's a lot of Bedells out there. Jenny Altschuler. How does my background in the Seattle punk scene affect my writing? That's interesting. Music in general informs my writing a lot. I think what the Seattle punk scene for me did, I started in bands. I had a fanzine when I was about 13 years old, and I started a band called March of Crimes when I was 14 years old. And, we played all the local all ages clubs in Seattle, which had a thriving scene then. And Stoney Gossard from Pearl Jam was in my band, and Ben Shepherd from Soundgarden. It was a very small kind of family-like scene. Everybody knew everybody. And I just think the ethos of that scene, to me, more than just affecting my writing, it really affected who I am, because high school for me, I was a little bit more of an outcaster. I felt like one. Turns out maybe I wasn't. I just didn't know. But it was my self-actualization. It was like these clubs were our places, you know what I mean? And this is like, hey, I have a voice and I'm being heard, and people are taking me seriously, and they're coming to see my band, and they're, and obviously from a writing standpoint, I mean, I had a fanzine that was maybe, 25 pages long, and I was writing 80% of the material myself, show reviews, record reviews, goofy little op-eds, stuff like that. So, it was not my first exercise in writing. I read a children's book when I was in 4th grade that was published by Seattle Pacific University. And then nothing for like 30 years after that. It was my auspicious beginning into publication, and then just nothing until I was 39 years old, and Soft Skull published All About Lulu. But many people from that Seattle scene are still like good friends of mine. I mean, they're so supportive. My musician friends, it's kind of interesting. They say actors want to be musicians. and musicians want to be writers. There's this kind of weird envy thing that goes on. And then I think a lot of writers want to be musicians, conversely. But it's just wonderful to wake up on publication day and have the bass player and the guitar player from Pearl Jam say, dude, I just finished your book. I love it. I'm so proud of you. And it's just nice, not because they are who they are, but just because they're friends I've had for 40 years that are still like, you know, putting wind in my sails. I just feel really grateful to have had the sort of support system I have had. Tom says, speaking of beer, your website looks like a lineup of craft beers. What are you drinking these days? Here's the thing. I'm hardcore, man. I'm just a rummy, basically. I drink a lot of beer, but to be honest, like the whole world has been taken over by IPAs and I just can't stand them. They give me a headache. I just don't like super hopped up beers. What I like is British ales. I like pale ales that aren't IPAs, and, you know, I'll drink some lager, but there's only about my favorite beer is Mirror Pond, you know, Mirror Pond's Deschutes Mirror Pond. I mean, I drink that beer like, I don't know, I must buy 3 cases a week. I like Harp, I like Bass, I like, you know, like British sort of malty ales with a little body, but not too hoppy. My agent, God love her, sent me a box on pub day. She sent me a box of all these beautifully packaged craft beers, but don't tell her they were all awful. I mean, they were just like, you know, like they just weren't I loved it. Me and my wife would drink and we'd be like, oh God, it would be like raspberry shortcake stout and like dessert beers. And there was one that I kind of liked that was just like a really spicy Bloody Mary, but it didn't taste like a beer at all. It tasted like a spicy Bloody Mary. But so, you know, as much as I love and support craft brewing, I'm kind of a, you know, there's about 5 beers that are in my wheelhouse, you know. And they're mostly pale ales. Thanks for asking. I'm getting thirsty. See, I'm not drinking yet because it's only 2 o'clock here. I don't start drinking until 5. You guys are, you know, you guys are in a different time zone. So I'm drinking a seltzer water right now. Ashamed to admit. Let's see. I'll describe the novel a little to you for those of you who don't know about it. As I said, there's a bifurcated timeline. My goal here was to, as I said, speak to the present moment in America without writing a political polemic, you know. I mean, I wanted to just embody the times, and I thought, hell, you know, how about a bunch of people brought together by fate on a speeding train, which should actually be heading south, if you catch my drift. And then I used the railroad to tie together the 4 stories. So the people in the 1850s stories are the descendants of the people from the modern stories, but 5 generations earlier. And together, through this bifurcated timeline, the story is told through a sort of call and response, switching chapters back and forth, and it forms a bigger piece, you know, a bigger puzzle. And we begin to see how these connections define the modern characters, and how both sets of characters really are beholden to one another in ways they don't even know about. The novel is all about connectivity. I mean, I use the construction of the Continental Railroad was a great opportunity for me to tie together with the modern train, but also, you know, concentrate on this idea of movement west and American ingenuity and tackle, you know, unflinchingly, really. I mean, I wanted to subvert some of this American ethos that's been canonized for 200 years, you know, the streets paved with gold and, you know, the melting pot, which I like the melting pot for the idea of pluralism, but to me, it's not an apt metaphor. What I visualize is more of a tapestry. I think our strength isn't that. I think our strength as a nation, as an ideal, is not just melting everything into one sort of culture. I think the strength is having all these different cultures together and having access to the great things each of these cultures bring to the American experiment. And so, like I said, it was more of like a braided, like a tapestry or something, weaving these. And I felt like I had to address pluralism and diversity. So I had to have characters from all backgrounds, you know, Irish and German and Jewish and Black and Native American and, you know, because I think like the story of America is more than just about, you know, the mythos we're taught is just all these European immigrants coming over and then these great captains of industry and then moving west for manifest destiny. I wanted to look at that as an ideal, but I needed to, we need to start telling the story right. I mean, manifest destiny basically gave us genocide and, the native diaspora. So I had to look at these things unsentimentally, but at the same time, I wanted to celebrate America because I do think the American experiment is still worthy. And I think part of the problem is this pluralism, which is supposed to be our strength, has now devolved into, as we're all aware, a sort of tribalism. And to be quite honest with you, if I had a goal for this novel, the goal for this novel was for it to be kind of a salve to these times, for people to just sort of reframe the way we're looking at America right now, and instead of just, this country's going down to the shitter, just stop back up and realize that we're really all into this nation building experiment together. We're still all beholden to each other. We're beholden to our own and other people's, ancestors 5-6 generations ago. We're all connected in this thing. And I think what's happening now with the political dialogue and the tribalism is, I would liken it to an argument with your spouse, where it's just a knockdown, ugly kind of argument. And people start saying stuff that's not even true just to win the argument. And I feel like that's kind of what our political dialogue has devolved into. Like, people are saying things they don't even believe, I think. And it's getting ugly, and it's getting more divisive. And I wanted this novel to be the opposite of that. It's an unsentimental look at America and the crimes that have been committed and all the flaws of the American experiment, but also it is an acknowledgement that, there are still parts of this vision that are actually quite beautiful, if that makes any sense. Black Butte Porter, yes. Gary Bedell, not that I know of. Okay, that's Tom again. Yes, I like the Black Butte Porter. That's one of the few porters I'll drink because it's not too heavy of body, and it actually has a little bit of effervescence. Sometimes those porters just kind of sit there for me. Brian Mooney, can you talk about getting with Soft Skull? I remember him when he was starting in Seattle and going from that to agents. Okay, so that was actually Brooklyn, where Richard Nash started Soft Skull, I think. Well, actually, the guy that started it years before was, what was his name? He worked at a Kinko's after hours, and he just started like publishing books and, stapling them and binding them at his job at Kinko's on swing shift or whatever. By the time I came to Soft Skull in 2008, I had already written 7 unpublished books. Some of them were good. Some of them I just didn't know what I was doing. I was literally sending 400-page manuscripts to the bottom of office buildings in New York with really pretentious cover letters and just scratching my head. Why isn't anybody publishing me? So, part of the problem wasn't that the writing wasn't good. Part of the problem was that I just wasn't doing my due diligence. And Richard Nash, the editor at Soft Skull, is the first example of when I realized, when I sort of got it, this is what I have to do to be published. Is the onus is on me to not carpet bomb every publisher in New York, is to find my champion and profile editors that I think would be good fits for me. And I had been following this little press Soft Skull for a number of years because they reminded me a lot of Sub Pop Records, because I grew up with Sub Pop Records and I know Jonathan and Bruce Pavitt, and I saw how they built their business, this little business from, inside their house to eventually having an office. And at this point, Richard was, running Soft Skull out of his apartment, like a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. But man, they were just publishing such great stuff. And I thought, man, I love their editorial voice. And so by this time I had already had 3 agents, and none of them had sold anything for me. I had one guy that had ended up, he was a young agent at the agency, but then he eventually got fired because it turns out he was sleeping on the couch at work. He was homeless. And then I had another agent, Harriet Wasserman, God love her. She was like a literary giant from like the 20th century. And she was like 95 years old by the time she was representing me. And she had, her client list was like Saul Bellow and like 3 Nobel Prize winners and me. Right. And, but then she eventually got ill and was hospitalized for a long period of time. And in fact, she didn't even realize that I had left the agency because just nothing was going to happen. And so, I sort of tendered my God, thank you so much for trying to champion me. I'm going to just kind of I'm going to go out there and just try to get it done myself now. But they never got the message. So after I had already sold a couple of books, I remember her assistant was like, hey, had you thought about sending it to Jeff Klosky at Penguin? And I'm like, hey, yeah, I actually left the agency 3 years ago. So what I'm saying is these people weren't exactly championing me. And so I decided to put the cart before the horse. And that's when I had been, like I said, I've been profiling Richard Nash at Soft Skull. I love the books they were publishing. And so it's a no-no in publishing. You're not supposed to send unsolicited manuscripts. You're not supposed to go straight to editors, especially not by email. You're supposed to follow this protocol where you send a query letter, and if they're interested, they'll ask for 15 pages and so forth and so on. But I'd been doing that for 5 years. It was getting me nowhere. So I just wrote to Richard Nash personally. And like I said, I let him know that I knew what he was doing, that I'm sending it to him specifically. There's a reason I'm reaching out to you with all these editors, because I think you're going to get me, because you publish this book and that publish, and you publish Matthew Sharp, and you publish these books that I think you're going to really connect with my work. And sure enough, he did. And he made me an offer. And then this is the great part. Then I could go out and choose any agent I wanted. See, that's the thing. All these young writers are just like, once they get an agent, they think they're in. But let me tell you something. It's like a realty agent if you don't have the right agent, So then I could choose anybody I wanted. So I just opened the freaking, Manhattan phone book and called any agent I wanted to. And I talked to one big agent, and she just tried to impress me with her client list kind of thing. Like, you should go with me because I represent so-and-so and so-and-so and so, all these other famous Jonathans or something. And then I called this guy, I think his name was Al Zuckerman. He was awesome. He sold everything. He was great. But I called him on the phone. He's like, look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, kid. I'm going to Miami Beach next week, and I'm going to bring your book with me. And I'll tell you what, I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to tell you right now, we might want to make a he, a she, and we might kind of give him a gun. And I was like, okay, this isn't exactly my guy here. And then eventually I found Molly Glick, who at the time was at Gene Nagar. And the first thing she said was, I love your book, but, and I'm like, okay, you got my ear. And her but was that I feel like this first act can be fleshed out a little bit more. There's some exposition here that I think could be turned into scene and so forth. And she was just speaking my language. Like, she was giving me great editorial feedback. And I'm like, this is my agent. And so I went with her, and I've been with her for 15 years. And she's now like the head of CAA Literaries, which is, CAA is like the biggest agency in the world. And I've been with her through 3 agency, and her career and my career have sort of ascended together. But it was all about the editorial. She's my first line editor. I love working with great editors. A lot of writers don't. I do, because the important thing about it is just knowing, I know that book that I want to write, you have to know what you're trying to achieve. And when you get feedback and it's not part of your vision, then you just kind of tune it out. But when you hear that thing that's going to make the book you want to write better, you're like, yes, yes, yes. And I've been very blessed to have an amazing agent editorially. And then I've only worked with 3 editors through like 9 books now. The first book was Richard Nash, who's an amazing editor. Then I worked with Chuck Adams for 6 books at Algonquin, and he was amazing. And then I recently made the transition for this book and the next book, and hopefully a bunch of books after that, to Dutton with John Parsley, who's also he's an executive editor like Chuck was, very similar style, not prescriptive, great editor. I've just been super lucky to have that sort of editorial support. And on that note, I use a lot of beta readers, because is this boring? If this is boring, just put up in the chat, like, come on, dude, this is getting boring. I don't know. I can't see your faces. So if I can see your faces, I can look out and say, oh my God, they look like a bunch of dead chickens. Maybe I should change the subject. But let's see, what do we got up here? Oh, okay. I was on the soft skull. I was trying to remember how I got here. I tend to spiral. So for me, the whole process of writing, if I could say, I feel like I'm getting better. Okay. Like, I'm not going to say, I'm proud of every one of my published books. There's 7 now. I'm proud of all of them. And when I'm saying I'm getting better, it's just, I don't know that means the readers are going to like the books better. I'm just kind of know what I'm doing a little more. And at the same time, I think like I probably lost a little something too. I mean, I think there was sort of like my early voice in a book like All About Lulu or something. There was sort of this hyperbolic, just amped up sort of like loquacious voice involved. It's probably been pared down a little bit. I mean, there's certain things I don't have, I don't go on these hyperbolic flights of fancy as much as I used to do. I'm not maybe as attracted to certain quirky elements of narrative as I used to be. But the one thing I've discovered, and I feel like is getting me better and better with each novel, because I just want to keep getting better. I mean, I just, every book, I just want to learn new things because I just love the process and I trust the process. So to me, the whole conceit of writing a novel is really just a dance between me and the reader, with the reader doing everything backwards and in heels. I mean, I depend on the reader. The reader is, the better my storytelling gets, it's all because I'm thinking about the reader. And when I say the reader, I'm not, it's not this massive 35 to 60-year-old college educated women demographic. It's just me on the other side. I want to give the reader what I want as a reader. I know what thrills me as a reader. I like convergences. I like a narrative that involves me in a way that it lets me put the puzzle of the narrative together without the author having to explain everything. What I realized about bad writing is that there's a million bad ways to write. I mean, you cannot give the reader enough information, in which case it's just obscure bad writing, or you can just browbeat the hell out of the reader by being too authorial and just like, telling too much. And then, but they both have the same thing in common. Those are the two extremes of bad writing, but they don't think about the reader. And that's I think where where great storytelling comes from, is this back and forth between the teller and the listener, the reader and the writer. It's like the same as it was with the oral tradition. I mean, really, sometimes I use like a joke, just the way jokes are, what does a joke do? It surprises. A punchline is like the great ending of a novel, because it surprises. That's why we laugh. We didn't see it coming. But then upon a moment reflection, we're like, wow, that is so true. That's why it's so funny, because it hurts, because it's true. And this is true of the book as well. And so in order to tell a good story, just like telling a good joke, you need to subvert the reader's expectations. And the only way you're going to effectively do that is to understand what expectations you're creating for the reader. So like when I first started writing, 17 novels ago, it was more about me being authorial and me sitting there going, what am I trying to say? How can I edify the reader? It's more about me as the conduit for, what I had to say, and my voice and my worldview. And now I don't view it that way so much. I view it as, what kind of experience do I want to give the reader? What do I want the reader to question? I want to ask the questions, readers. I want to ask them big questions, and I want them to reflect on them, and I want them to come to their own conclusions. Again, I don't like to be polemical. My job is to, sorry, I got to pick my nose. And sorry, I'm batshit crazy. I know I'm manic. I skip transitions. I talk too fast. And this is one of the reasons I write, is because I hate this guy. I am full of like just self-loathing, and like, trust me, it's helpful for me, but I like myself on the page. That's what keeps me going. I like myself on the page because I'm not spitting in everybody's faces. I can stop myself when I need to. I can highlight stuff and just push delete. But when I open my mouth, I don't know what's going to come out. I don't even remember where I was with that. So yeah, sorry if I'm going too fast. Let's see what else we got up here. Beta readers. Yes, I was getting to that. I don't even think I used the word, but yes, I use a lot of beta readers. As I said, I like to work with the reader. Because what happens when you work with the reader is the reader becomes the greatest tool in your belt. If you work with a reader, then you have to view the story as purely as information on some level. And so you're always aware, as long as you're aware of the reader, you're always aware of what information you're giving the reader. Because so often as the creator of something, we know all this stuff. We know all this off the page motivation and all this history of our characters that never makes it on the page. But we don't tend to keep track of what we're putting on the page if we don't think about the reader. So it forces you to be honest and like, okay, I know exactly what the reader knows. So now I know what kind of expectation I'm creating for the reader. So now all of a sudden I can use the reader as this tool I can persuade them one way and subvert their expectations. I can use things like misdirect, which is always thrilling for me as a reader. When you think like, you're attaching the dots, you know what's going on, and then boom, nothing is as it seems. And you see that the author has set you up that way. And that's because the author trusted you to put these pieces together, and he sort of manipulated you and persuaded you. But that's how it works. So I use a bunch of beta readers, during the process of a novel, like maybe 8 or 10. It's not always the same people. And then I also use what they commonly call sensitivity readers now, but I don't look at them that way because this word sensitivity makes me bristle a little bit. I look at them as experience readers. See, I write outside the purview of my personal experience a lot, because that's why I write, is to try to become a more expansive person, to try to jump through that empathic window and sort of accrue this sort of experience that feels lived by inhabiting other characters and inhabiting this otherness. And so I need to, I'm not an Iraqi combat vet. So if I'm writing about a combat vet, I have to talk to people I know that have done, that are, combat veterans or so forth. Or if I'm writing Black characters, I have Black friends. If I'm writing Chinese characters, I have Chinese friends. If I'm writing gay characters, because I can't afford to hit a single false note. If I hit one false note, I can lose the reader. You've been there. We've all been there as readers, everything's going along fine. And then there's something, maybe the writer's talking about something, and like, I read Bernard Mahmoud, I'm a baseball fan. I read a book that's considered a modern classic, The Natural. And I'm like, wait a minute, man, nobody hits 673, just something like that. And then it's like, he lost me, because it's not realistic. It's not authentic. It's not credible. And so I use, in addition to just plain beta readers for like, how is the story working? I rely on people that, have had the experiences, or as close to the experiences as I can find, to what transpires in my novel. So I know I'm not hitting any false notes. So for instance, I think in the Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, I had an EMT deliver a baby at I think it happened at Yellowstone or something, like in the middle of this crowd. And I didn't know how that worked. I'm not an EMT. So I have a buddy, Dave Coatsworth, who's an EMT. And I said, hey, will you sit down and have a beer with me? And I sort of block out the scene in terms of what I need to happen or what I want to happen. And then I go, so what do I do next? He's like, well, you probably go back to the ambulance now, and you get a safety blanket, or then now you cut the ligature, anything. Just walk me through the experience. And that's one of the things I've learned about research, is that if you know what you're trying to accomplish, you don't have to research as broadly. You can get the exact answers you're looking for by just knowing, not letting the research get in the way of the story you're going to tell, if that makes any sense. Because I had that experience with West of Here. I read like 30 books, and then I interviewed like 70 people. In the book, ostensibly, is about the town of Port Angeles on the Olympic Peninsula, and it's settling, and then later it's bust. And, so I'd interview all these people, and like every old codger in Port Angeles I interviewed, it's like, well, you can't tell the story of Port Angeles without talking about Wheeler's Corner. Everybody's got this thing that just has to be in your novel. And I'm like, fuck it. I'm calling it Port Bonita. Because, at a certain point, the research gets in the way of the story I'm trying to tell. Sometimes I'm not interested in facts. Sometimes I'm just interested in truth. But where that becomes important is experience. And if somebody's experience is outside my personal purview, then I need to lean on somebody and use somebody as a resource to help me make sure I get it right. And so for This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, which is my novel about an 80-year-old woman who goes on an Alaskan cruise. Well, I went on the Alaskan cruise, but I'm still not an 80-year-old woman. Luckily, my mom was. Luckily, she has friends that were. Luckily, I had some idea just growing up with my mom what her experiences in her past was, what it was like to be a woman in the 1950s, or man, I'm really rambling here. Just tell me if I'm getting boring. Let's see if there's anything else up here. This is kind of obscure, but do you have a favorite sentence from your own work, one that stuck with you, or that holds everything in the palm of a hand, that kind of thing? You know what? That's an interesting question, because every book, and every single book, I have one of those sentences. And it's what I call the heartbeat of the book. If I were to go back and do a sort of narrative archaeology of all my books, I will find that one passage that sort of permeates the book in every way. Every sentence of the book, that when I write that passage, I know I have found the heart of this book. And for instance, in Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, it's the sentence I think they even used it on the flap about listen to me, everything you think you know, everything you, in Harriet, there's a passage where Harriet's having lunch in Juneau with her daughter, and she looks across the table with her, and there's a few sentences that follow there. So like every book kind of has that thing. I generally speaking am not all about my sentences. I want the prose to swing. I want them to swing. It's not that I can't be lyrical. It's just that the words are there to serve the story. So, you know, a lot of times I'll read something and it's just the prose are just too purple for me. Like somebody will be, you know, walking across the parking lot eating an apple and their thoughts are a smoky chiaroscuro of nostalgia. And I'm like, fuck, they're walking across a parking lot eating an apple. Just get me from point B here. And then, you know, when they're holding their dying father on the edge of the Great Divide at sunset, now go lyrical on me. You know what I'm saying? I take my sentences seriously, but when I craft a novel, I'm most concerned. The language has to be there because again, I'll lose. But my first concern is just telling a great story, and I have to be good with the sentences to do that. But like I don't conceive of it as just, you know, I hear this philosophy about writing about just putting one sentence after another, and that's how you do it. That's not how it occurs to me. It's more like a fever dream where I see it unfolding, and the words just got to kind of follow, and then they come after. If that makes any sense. So yes, I have a bunch of. I don't have all the books. I would read some of them to you for their sheer luminescence and beauty, but I don't really have my books here down at Bob's house. So all right.
I have a question, and
Okay.
I thought you might want to take a breath and maybe drink some water.
I'm sorry, right?
No, I thought you might need some water. I was gonna, you know, send out a Saint Bernard or something. And this is not about writing exactly, but I know that a lot of you were talking about your work being informed by music, and I know you love music, and I know you listen to music a lot when you're writing and when you're not writing. But the music you listen to, how did you get from sort of the Seattle grunge to what you listen to now? Is this music?
You know, because music is a dialectic. You know, I mean, it goes throughout the times. You know, one of the ways is like when I first got really into like like first wave, second wave American hardcore, you know, you find out very quickly who that band's influences were. Like then you're going back 5, 10, 15 years and you're finding Johnny Thunders and the New York Dolls and MC5 and the Stooges. And so you're already, now all of a sudden you've moved back 15 years to these other artists who are in most cases better musicians than the one you're currently listening to. But then then I finally took a big leap into jazz when I was about 17. I'd been in a punk band for 4 years and I was just ready to expand my musical horizons. So I just started picking up like Charles Mingus and things like that. And then from there, I got into, you know, R&B and soul and just my whole goal with music is to be just very eclectic. I have like 5,000 vinyl records out in my garage. You know, it's ridiculous. They're taking over. But like they're all across genres. I've got some of everything. I mean, I've got punk rock, I've got R&B, I've got soul, I've got reggae, I've got calypso, I've got hip hop, I've got country, I've got alt country, I've got, you know, I just like a huge palette of music and then there's music that I love that's not even really good music. It's just because the lyrics are so good. I mean, I'm not going to listen to Leonard Cohen because I want to fucking get up off of the sofa and shake my thing, man. It sounds like some dude burning his arms with hot candle wax in a cold water flat, you know, but the lyrics are just like amazing. Like, I mean, I listen to Leonard Cohen and I cry, but it's not because of his sort of folky Puff the Magic Dragon guitar sound. You know what I mean? So there's times I listen to music that it's more like literature for me, but I just, in general, my go-to is I want it to swing, man. I want the music to swing. And that doesn't mean it has to be fast or it could be one person with a guitar or a banjo or whatever, but it's just this idea of swing, you know, which is really, we can just kind of credit Louis Armstrong for inventing it, you know, because he basically, you know, I mean, King Oliver and some other people probably helped get him there, but this idea that it used to be just these boring time signatures, 1, 2, 3, 4. So music before Louis Armstrong was like Dun, 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 you know, Red River Valley. Dun, 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 dun. And then Louis Armstrong suddenly made it dun, 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 dun. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I mean by swing. That's what I want my prose to do. I want them to be buoyant. I want them to be like water. I want them to just be carrying the reader along more than I want them to be going, oh my God, that sentence is so beautiful, I have to read it again, because that's just as bad as hitting a false note for me, because I'm trying to give the narrative to the reader. I want it to feel like their experience. So there comes a time in each book, in each story, there comes, you know, it's cyclical. There comes times in a book when you really do want to wow them with prose because the moment calls for it. You know what I mean? And you hit this truth, and, you know, and those are the passages people quote and things like that. And I love writing those passages, and I love those passages, but honestly, to read an entire book composed of those passages would be something different. That would be almost, to me, more the realm of poetics than storytelling. So I don't know if I answered. I probably alienated
you did actually, and I totally get it too. So my last question is about the structure of the book. How in the world did you keep from going crazy, jumping back and forth like that? I mean, how did you keep track of sort of where you were? You know, you go forward 50 years and back 20 years and forwards. You know, how did you decide?
I had to. The thing about dealing with a big cast, and I've written some books with big casts. I think there's like 60 characters in West of here. This one's got about 30 characters, but 20 actual points of view. The trick to writing a book like this is I never want to write a book that's got like a persona dramatis at the beginning, or, you know, a key where the reader has to stop on page 233 and go, now, who is this character again? Who are they related to? I don't want to have a family tree because, again, I've broken the spell. The reader is suddenly off the page, out of my world now, flipping back to the beginning, trying to do some exercise in logic or identification. So it's really important for me to make the characters track easily. And that's a hard thing to do when you have 20 different points of view in a timeline that's bifurcated by 170 years. So the problem you potentially run into is that you're going to have characters that are going to be off the page for 60, 70 pages at a time. You have to figure out a way to keep those characters very clearly in the consciousness of the reader so that they'll recognize them immediately 70 pages later. They don't have to think, who is this person? And so the way I did that was by devising sort of a system of connectivity, which is a very layered system. And I mean, like the first line of it would be genealogy, you know, I mean, because these characters on both sides of the lines have genealogical connectivity to each other. And then there's place, and then there's theme, and then there's this experiential level, and then there's even coincidence, you know, all these that keep these characters that are off the screen in the reader's mind, so that when they come back, it's a fluid transition. It's like they were never gone. And this is done through this like complex system of connectivity, because, you know, I read a lot of books that flip back and forth, and it can be a jarring ride. To make it as hard as I could for myself, it's like I want to make that be the biggest danger here. It's a dangerous proposition, you know, but I want to fucking nail it. You know what I mean? I want to do it in a way that it's totally easy to track, and that's the joy of the book. And so that's how I did it, was with connectivity. And truthfully, this book unfolded pretty organically because I did a lot of sort of conceptual and logical work on it beforehand out in the garage, you know, with notes, not necessarily outlines, but just a kind of a distillation process with all these characters and all these themes and all this history, so that I could view it in my mind as just more of this one sort of kernel or thesis, and then free myself. Then I'd be free to be confident once I got inside the narrative, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So when I wrote it, I didn't write like all the modern parts and all this parts, or even all one character at a time, because if I'd done that, I would have missed so many opportunities for connectivity, because this sort of organic thing happens when you're inside the story and you're making unconscious associations. You might be moving this character and you're like, well, wait a minute, I have an opportunity here to make a connection to the chapter I just wrote about this character. So if I were to do it all and just sort of nest them like a one of those Russian nesting dolls, I would miss a lot of opportunities. And I don't think the novel would have succeeded. I think it was necessary to sort of write it and skip around just as I was asking the reader to do. Because again, I'm thinking about the reader. So I'm thinking about how smooth is this transition from this chapter to this chapter? What do I need as a reader to still be invested in the end of this scene so that when I pick it up again, I remember exactly where I was because I didn't want to leave in the first place. I've been sort of creating an anticipation in the reader. That was the thing, was to kind of try to attempt to make the reader feel sort of breathless, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh, I'm onto this character, but not have that be disappointing as it sometimes is. Like sometimes you'll read a book and you'll go to the next character and then you're like, oh God, it's her again, Debbie Downer. So, you know, it's a challenge to try to make the characters not necessarily equally likable, but equally relatable and equally memorable. You know what I mean? Which means the decisions they make have to have equal import. The stakes all have to be high. And so does that make sense? Am I making sense?
You are.
Fuck,
And you are a champion. I can't believe you survived this whole hour with a monologue.
It's not fun for me, I swear. I got to look at myself too. And I'm like, God, you look like you're insane. You're this guy that doesn't shut up in a $2 novelty hat. There's spit on your screen. People, it's amazing to me that anyone even understands what I'm saying.
I think we understood it all. It was fascinating. And thank you so much for.
Thanks. And particularly you for hosting, and thank you everybody for the questions. I'm going to just, Stephanie Green asked one question that I can answer really quick.
Sure.
Which is, in writing fiction, what comes for you first? Character, setting, dialogue? Character for me. That's what I'm going to say right off the bat. It always starts with character with me. Even if the novel turns into this sort of high concept narrative apparatus like West of Here or Small World, where there's all these timelines and all these characters, it really is just all about the characters for me. That's where it begins. And then showing how these characters are connected in a wider screen, or something like West of Here, which uses, like I said, like 60 points of view. In that case, it's the character of the town takes center stage and sort of usurps the traditional role of the protagonist. And then all the ancillary characters become like the decisions the character of the town makes. But yeah, I figured I could answer that one pretty clearly and cogently. It always starts with character to me, because a character has a built-in arc. A character is born with certain potentialities and yearnings and goals, and you can just set them free and try to make those goals and dreams or whatever happen. And then it's just a matter of kicking them in the teeth over and over with like a Kodiak steel-toed boot until they finally arrive somewhere near where you're trying to get them.
Thank you so much, Johnny. I mean, you're amazing, and I hope everybody runs out and buys your book.
Yes, please do. I got to buy a new roof. My kids might need orthodontia. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to pay for some weddings, some colleges. And
college,
I can't go back to landscaping, dude. I can't raise a family of 5 on landscaping. So yes, please go out and buy my book from an independent bookstore. But if you got to buy it on Amazon, I'm not too proud to beg at this point, because, I got mouths to feed, and I feel blessed and lucky to be making my living on writing, but I can always try to sell more books. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, everyone. And we will be back next month with a story of Vermont, which is a personal history. Author David Holmes has written about his family and the legacy of family farms in his book on being a Vermonter and the rise and fall of the Holmes farm, 1822 to 1923. I guess he was instrumental in developing lots of growing techniques for apples, and he also raised trotters and bred them, and so he talks a lot about the legacy of the family and the farm and what's happened to family farms in Vermont. So they'll be very different, and until then, stay safe and everybody have a wonderful weekend.